Benicio Del Toro. Followed by Teyana Taylor. And then finally, Leonardo DiCaprio. I should have stood for you guys. I'm so sorry. I missed the royal etiquette of waiting for everybody else to sit. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for making this film. As these guys know, having just seen it, it's a film that takes you across decades, across tones, across places. It's a journey in so many different ways. And I think each of your character kind of have a moment of setting the tone of the part of the film that you're in. And I want to talk to each of you about how you do that, how you build that character who sets tone. But I figure the way to start is with the character we start with, which is Perfidia Beverly Hills. So Teyana Taylor, we see you are setting the moment of this arrival of the French 75, of the intensity of those first 40 minutes. And it's a big question to ask, but when you take on this character and you realize not just how dominant Perfidia is, but how to channel that and how to make her this character you do not forget for the rest of the film, how did you start with that?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Perfidia is very complex, you know, but one thing I love about her is she's unapologetically herself, you know, and I think, you know, Paul and I really went in with a plan with Perfidia and understanding what she needed to do, and the mistakes that she needed to make, you know. I think that her mistakes set up Willa, you know, it sets up the next generation to rise, and you know, even throughout the rise, you know, it came with my past flaws, and that came back to Hunt, Bob, and Willa. But you know, Perfidia, and Perfidia had to do what she had to do, and you know, Perfidia had to dip out on everybody, but she did it, you know. But again, to your point, it really set the tone, and it needed to happen, and Perfidia needed to fall for Willa to rise.
When we meet the French 75 in the beginning of this movie, there's bomb throwers, literal bomb throwers, fireworks, everything else. But to have an organization, you have to have a caretaker, which Regina, I think, is where your character comes in, as somebody who can get everybody where they need to be on time, or have a look in your eyes. I think is a really dominant part of the beginning of that film, of saying, I know what's happening, I'm clocking this. So Regina, for you, when approaching that earlier part of the film, how did you get that across with so little dialogue but so much warmth?
That's a great question. I don't know. I guess you just really feel it. You know, you think, what would you do in those real circumstances? Like, you know, it's Perfidia. You know, Deandra loves Perfidia, but you know how you see something and everything's going well. Now, I think I knew this was going to be a problem because it could never end well. The two of them getting together. So I think once you see a romance start, the pregnancy was a concern. There was certainly a lack of focus, and I think you start to feel where things are going to go astray in your group, and when it's different from what you started from, you feel that. So I think by the time Perfidia goes back to Perfidia. By the time Perfidia had the incident at the bank, I think you kind of know it's over. And you know it's the beginning of the end. But I would like to say Deandra loves Perfidia. I mean, they're close friends. You don't necessarily see it as much as you did in the making of it. But
I think you feel it, though, for sure.
Yeah.
So, Leo, you've got Ghetto Pat in the beginning of the film, who then turns into Bob. But it really is kind of two different guys. Like, you're watching him in the beginning, wanting to just be part of this group, kind of this admiration for Perfidia and everybody else. And then you kind of see that light go out as the movie goes on a little bit, and he's, you know, holding up in his house. So did you approach it as two different people? Did you kind of see this as two different guys who then sort of become the same guy as the film goes on?
I think I did. You know, Paul has these singular concepts and ideas when he makes a movie that becomes the narrative and the structure, and the idea of a character that was basically kind of an extra to her revolutionary acts. You know, he was the bomb maker. He's like sitting in the background. She's like, you know, make a show, Bob. And this was based a lot on characters from the book Days of Rage that we read, which is based on the Weather Underground and civil rights movements and the Black Panthers. And, you know, the idea of these characters, what's the aftermath of that? You know, where did they go to too far extremes? And what's the repercussions on the next generation? And how do these people sort of assimilate themselves after they've done horrendous acts themselves? And so the idea of meeting Bob again there were a lot of different conversations of that. And I think I figured out the idea that he had to sort of self-medicate himself from the trauma of what he experienced, and now he's raising this daughter, completely paranoid about the world around him, offline, you know. This when we went up to Northern California, so much of the locations of this movie became their own characters, and they informed, I think, who we were as characters. So I got to meet a lot of people in Northern California, which were they were called hipnecks. They were like hippies that were kind of, you know, rednecks too, like don't tread on me, get off my property, I hate the government, but also smoke pot and I like to eat mushrooms. So that kind of informed who Bob was in the aftermath, and then the whole idea of having to protect a daughter and being completely ill-equipped to do so and not knowing how to relate to her or the next generation whatsoever. A lot of going to these locations were a huge part, I think, for all of us, of creating these characters.
Were the Hipniks as fun to hang out with as it sounds? It sounded like a good time.
I kind of loved it up there.
Maybe a little paranoid though, maybe it's hard to really relax around them. Talking about these characters kind of setting the tone for sections of the movie, I think Sensei is a huge tone-setting character. I mean, the Sensei's part of the movie is such a wild ride, but it's not just that Sensei is kind of a problem solver. He's the guy who you want to train your daughter and to help you out of a jam, but he's so loving. He's such a locus point for this entire community. And Benicio, it's my understanding that a lot of that part of his personality came from you, of kind of understanding how he was going to fit into the entire world around him, not just Bob's story. Is that true?
Well, not really. Not really. It really came from Paul. And you know, sitting there and working on the story and working on my character with Leo, I think that, you know, we all chipped in and, you know, I'll tell you a story. Paul told me that he wanted me in the film and that Leo was already in it. And I said, well, he didn't tell me much about the character. He just sent me a picture, a photograph of a poster of a tiger in a judo kimono. That was it. And then the script had some things that we questioned and this and that, but there was one line that two words that were really poignant, and Paul kept repeating them, and it's ocean waves. And also the introduction of the character where he tells Willa, breathe. And so that's really the foundation of the character in a way, and also perhaps that he's for the underdog, you know, so put that together and then maybe you get a sensei. Yeah.
You've all talked about how Paul is kind of ready to reinvent things and improvise and kind of change things on the fly, which feels kind of unimaginable seeing this movie, as you guys think maybe it feels so perfect the way that it is. But Regina, you've talked about, so I think it's specifically the bank robbery scene where it's in the script, chaos TBD is how it was written down. What do you do as an actor when that's in the script and then you show up on set?
It was the bank robbery. It was after the bank robbery. We get in the car, and you know, Paul doesn't have a lot of description for the chaos TBD. And so I do remember one day he took us all and he was kind of like, you're gonna run here and the car's gonna be here. Do you remember that day when we were in
I remember that day.
Yeah, you were right. Y'all, you ran a lot. and so you can't, and you think, oh, okay, this is the roadmap. But I think when we did it, like I didn't know we were actually gonna drive between cars that were gonna crunch, and that there was gonna be sirens and helicopters. I couldn't imagine the vastness. And then I was like, well, Paul, what do I? He was like, well, what would you do? And I was like, okay, I'll do that. If you were going to be in a bank robbery. So it is a lot. It was my brain didn't quite grasp what chaos TBD meant.
Teyana, what was that chaos like from your perspective? There's a lot of running that we see on screen. I imagine there's even more that we didn't get to see.
Let me tell you something.
She's still running in her brain.
You know, I still low-key have an attitude because we had this one scene. We wanted to reshooting it. Remember when I was jumping over the fence with the gun and like
in one hand.
I was out.
Yeah.
Like I had the stunts. And when I went to Paul's house to watch the movie, it wasn't there. I said, "You motherfucker!" Yo, I thought I was killing it too. I really was, but we had to reshoot it because he wanted it to be like more a little bit of daytime. It had nothing to do with me. But yeah. I killed
It might have to do with me. My knee gave out.
The knee gave out. You know what's crazy? I was looking at you to see if it was okay. I was looking at you to see if it was okay to say that story because I know I had said it one other time before. And she looked at me like. My girl knee gave out. I've been waiting to tell this story. Her knee gave out. We was running out the bank. She started limping. I said, "Baby, come on."
I put it in the character. I put it in the character.
It's like this.
I really was.
I said, "Baby, we caught." And I had just caught a body in
We
there
wouldn't
too.
have
I'm
got
like,
caught
oh.
if you hadn't shot him. You shot him.
Knee gave out.
So Leah, you talked about how you wanted to work with Paul for such a long time. You guys have been talking about this project for a long time. But how much did that approach to changing things and feeling the moment or changing the ending of the movie? I think how much did that surprise you as the way that he worked, and how did you lean into that and in the process of working with Paul and stuff?
I think he's got one of the best combinations. A lot of times writer-directors are very specific and beholden to their ideas, their dialogue, the structure of their story. But he also has this incredible looseness and gives the actors ownership of their characters and the ability to improvise and create these moments. And by the way, I was just listening to Benicio talk about how he came into the film and Paul gave. The way Benicio came into this film was incredible. I mean, we was off shooting Phoenician Scheme. We were in the middle of production. We're like, we're shutting down production. I think we stopped for 2.5 months to make sure we got him as Sensei Carlos because we knew there was nobody else. But he came in with such specificity, character development before he got there, and an idea of who Sensei was. And Paul and I, we had a completely different structure for this sort of road trip that we go on. And all the ideas of him having that sort of underground railroad for immigrants, him being tapped into the community like this, we had a completely different storyline. And it's a combination of that specificity that came from Benicio and that how fervent he was about who Sensei Carlos was and who he knew in the community and what he would and wouldn't do, and the flexibility of Paul to take on those ideas and in 2 days create this entire compound with a family, with that whole situation where he goes underground to a church, that whole hallway with all the skater kids. That was made up in 2 days. And that's the beauty of what Paul does. I mean, if you come to him, most of the ideas you come to him with, he's like, I don't know about that. But that one idea that you have, that he's like, okay, that's a good one. He's truly willing to steer the ship in a completely different direction and give it a try and change the entire structure of the movie, which is a beautiful thing. It's one of his great talents.
Yeah. So Benicio, you weren't willing to take the credit for any of this, but now we know that you really were responsible for a lot of this.
Well, there's always two sides to every story. So there is a truth about Paul being able to pivot on a dime, and it is true that I had my questions, and Leo and I, we pecked at him, you know, with questions, and that's how. But Paul was willing to say, like Regina said, "What would you do? What would you do?" And you know, so we started like that, and then it just went, and then Flo was doing the. You know, set design. She was incredible too. She was like, we were going to visit churches to see where we could take the migrants to, and because she and Paul knew that maybe the only place that migrants would be able to be safe from, you know, being arrested was either churches or Indian reservations. So, you know, so it wasn't just me, but, you know, maybe I was a spark in it, but it just, everyone was moving everything to make it happen. And, you know, I mean, Leo would give me lines too. Hey, how about you say this, you say that, you know? And so there was a real community and a real, you know, really like the cliche of like, you're only as good as the actor you're working with. It's a fact. And I think Paul understands that, and he allows the actors to really, you know, encourage each other and make each other better.
So Regina, you're Paul's neighbor, I believe, as part, not why you're in the movie, but you've known him in that capacity for some amount of time. But maybe the same question is for Leo. How much did this way of working take you by surprise, or allow you to elevate something you weren't able to do before? And you know, how different was it from the way you're used to working?
You know, it was wonderful. I had been a big fan of Paul as a filmmaker, and then discovered after we met at South by Film Festival. I think he was working. I think he had just done Phantom Thread, and I loved Phantom Thread so much. And so, in that we discovered we were neighbors, like not like next. I know that there's a story that makes it look like it was next door, so we share
I
gardens.
do like imagining you guys sharing a garden.
I know, yeah, yeah. But we lived close, and so I was a fan of his filmmaking, but also the way he watched films. You know, so I used to watch movies with Paul, and I would learn so much and be able to ask questions. So to work with him was wonderful. A little bit nervous because by then we had become neighbors and friends, and so it was. I was probably a little more like, oh, but now I had forgotten about that component. No, it's not the right word. I hadn't forgotten, but it had been put to the side because I had, you know, after a while, you know, someone you don't look at them that way. But when I worked with him, I was so comfortable because there's so much discussion before you start, and you by the time you walk on set, you know, we had met everyone. Oh, I didn't meet you. Oh, I love you. I'm remembering it because I love Benicio Del Toro, and I wanted to meet him so much, and I didn't have scenes with him, and I was like, when do I meet Benicio? But I had met Leo and Teyana, and I think, no.
Yes, you did.
I didn't meet you.
You had dinner.
Yeah,
You
dinner,
paid
but
for it.
I know. We met at dinner, but I didn't meet you at the camera test and all those things. That's what I mean.
That's true.
I had met Leo. What was that question? I was hearing the whole thing. Oh, yes, it was wonderful.
So you guys are key components of this entire cast, but the cast is massive. Not just Chase Affinity and Sean Penn, who are other huge roles in this, but just the tiniest roles in this, and just stand out to me so much. Every time I've revisited it, there's incredible people who have 1 or 2 lines of dialogue. And I wonder for each of you, maybe Leah, to start with you closest, who made you up your game that you shared a scene with, or who surprised you in this huge
Oh, really?
I will say this, that, you know, you could see in his filmmaking there is this strivings for authenticity, always. I mean, we talk about the locations with Flo, Michael Bowman with the lenses he chooses. You know, he doesn't do a lot of modern day films, and I remember watching The Master for the first time. I'm like, I am in this time period, and there's something visceral and tactile about the way he shoots things that I don't think any one of us can really describe, but he's constantly looking, constantly analyzing what he's seeing through that lens, and as far as the actors are concerned that we got to work with, they were informed so much by the locations that we got to go to. Places in California, I've been all over California, I've never been to these places. They took a year to find, Borrego Springs and Eureka, and then we went to, El Paso, and he handpicked people that had some of these jobs, people that, had a storefront, a family community there. And when Benicio had the idea that I wasn't going to kill a pivotal character, and we both agreed that Sensei wouldn't take care of me if I shot somebody in his dojo, we then went to, all right, how are we going to get Bob out? Then we went to somebody who really was a corrections facility person and a real nurse, and we asked them. We said, okay, what would you do in this situation? If you knew somebody on the inside, well, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't let this person out. Well, if you had to, well, I'd give them some sort of code, and then we'd say, okay, what if you gave a code like, well, bad hombres are going to take their insulin,
that's a real person working in the...
That's a real person that did that job. Then we went to the nurse, and she's like, well, what if you had to get this guy out of the hospital? Well, I wouldn't do it. Well, if you did, if you had to, well, I'd go flirt with the corrections officer who's usually outside, and I'd whisper in his ear, and I'd tell him, all that stuff is navigated and constructed from these real people in these real locations that really did what they did. So there's a, like I said, there's something tactile to all because it's reality.
Teyana, who helped you up your game, and who challenged you when it came to taking all this on?
Honestly, like me being on set, it was one big masterclass for me. I'm always a student. I will forever be a student. So I automatically felt like I needed to step my game up regardless, I'm a warrior. So like when he yelled, action is time, I'm on a battlefield and, I got a job to do, and it's my job to be present for my scene partners, for my cast, what I'm saying, for my director. So for me, it was a masterclass. Everywhere I was, every single scene, I'm just learning. I'm SpongeBob SquarePants. I'm just soaking it all up. You know what I'm saying? I'm just soaking it all up.
December 15th at Minute. Please go see SpongeBob. I want to do it. Who's the premiere? No. I am in it, but
She said the room is sold out tonight, y'all. Listen, SpongeBob SquarePants, December 15th.
I think it's the 22nd. I don't even know the date.
But yeah, always a student, always learning, super masterclass for me.
Yeah. Regina, how about you? You are the only person who got to interact with the nuns. I don't know if that's what you're going to say, but I imagine everyone else is jealous. That was an incredible group of people.
They are, and they're a real group. They're, They're a real group of nuns. They make a instead, they're not Catholic, but they make a vow to the cannabis plant. And it's true. And they make and sell some of the purest Sisters of the Valley, some of the very, very good medicinal things. They don't make chocolates because they don't ever want children to get it mixed up. So they're very good if you have any aches or pains. But actually,
Another link to their website.
but it actually, you know what? It was actually Danvers. He's a real, he's a former ICE agent.
The interrogator?
The interrogator, yeah. That statement comes with so much now, before. And he was really great because he interrogated, it wasn't forceful, but something about the way he did it was really, I don't know, it had an impact on me because it was scary, but it was calm. And I think for me, that was working with him in that particular scene was
It's how it feels to watch that scene too. I think it's intense, but in control. Benicio, how about you? Anyone stand up for you?
Well, the whole cast, number one, but I think, I came into the film a little bit, like Leo was saying, a little bit late, and our opening scene actors who were actually, there was a lady that owned the store that we're in, and I just leaned into her and I said, hey, you mind if I go to the cashier register and I punch in there and get some money out? We'll give it back. And so I'm walking into the store and I'm doing that, and Leo's doing his business with the phone, and we're yelling at everybody, get out, close the door. And I think that moment, which was the first day I shot, it made everything so like intense and it focused. I think the relationship between Leo and myself immediately was, it got together right in that moment. It just clicked. And a lot of these non-actors were kind of like really into it and almost like elevating us. and it was fantastic to work with them. Most of those people you see in El Paso, and the actors that are playing the migrants and my family in there, they're non-actors. Yeah, it was great.
While we're talking about Sensei though, in the scenes where you guys are in the car, you are really driving the car with Leo hanging half out of it, right?
Yeah.
They let you guys do that?
Well, yeah, they put a lot of trust in me, and I wasn't drinking real beer.
Was that more stunts than you expected to do in a Paul Thomas Anderson movie?
I'm not taking credit for doing all those stunts. I did not fall off that building. Afterwards, I did fall at the tasting, but yeah, I mean, it's guerrilla filmmaking. It was awesome. It was awesome.
I did want to ask you, he was talking about you, the business with the phone. Phone acting, I think, is notoriously difficult for actors, and you have 2 big phone scenes in this movie. How do you make those good and not feel like you're talking into outer space?
I watched Al Pacino in Dog Day Afternoon.
Good answer.
That's what I did. Yeah, but it's that one singular idea. I mean, that idea takes over my whole character's journey. I mean, I just love that he made this revolutionary that you think is going to make all these insanely acute decisions that are going to manifest itself in finding his daughter, and he's going to pull out all his tricks. But he didn't even write down the password. I mean, doesn't even write down the password, and he's too stoned to remember it. And then, 2/3 of the way through the film, I'm still figuring out how to get the password. It's just an amazing idea, and just felt so
But
real.
I love what he did remember, that Mexican hairless.
Like, immediately, like not a minute of hesitation. Talking about specific scenes, Teyana, since this crowd has all seen the movie, we can talk about how Perfidia returns with the reading of the letter at the very end. And I mean, maybe not dissimilar to phone acting where it's just your voice and you have to carry so much in that scene. What was filming that like for you? How did you capture that without the physicality you've been able to bring to the character in the beginning of the film?
Yeah, that was a hard scene. At that point when I did that letter, we were losing Adam, and that was a lot. And me and Paul, we sat at a table with our sound guy, and all 3 of us was crying. And it was one take. Like it was one read, and that's why I took my time with it. And I cried, and I asked the questions that needed to be asked to Willa. And it was so emotional. And I remember us trying to go, like months later, he was like, oh, let's try it again. And I was like, look, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm like, that's the one. But I'm gonna try it for you regardless. And we tried, and he was like, yeah, this shit sucks. I said, yeah, because that one was it was so good. And I'm happy that you all have received it that way, because, I'm like, I hope people can hear that, because Perfidia has been a mess throughout the movie. So it's like to hear her so vulnerable and know that letter came from a real place, and the voice and the emotion came from a real place. It was really dope that people received it that way.
Yeah, and you felt it at the time. You knew that it came across in a way it never would.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to redo it. Like it was just, but of course I'm gonna always still try. But that one was it was special. It was emotional, and again, he holding the moonlight. Like it was really it took us a minute to get through it, but it was just one long take. It was longer than that. But I think those moments are like, are you happy? Do you have love? You know, will you try to change the world like I did? You know, we failed, but you will not. You know, these are all the things that I felt like Perfidia wanted to be asked as well. You know, Perfidia was in survival mode and majority of her life. You know, she was all she had. So I think she asked a lot of necessary questions. And again, we were losing Adam. Rest in peace to Adam. And it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah. Regina, the scene of yours that pops for me thinking back on the movie is when you kind of find Willa in the bathroom at the school dance, and there's kind of like, I think the score has this kind of magic quality to it. It's like you've stepped out of time in some way, and just kind of the intensity of your gaze and the calmness, kind of what you were saying earlier about the interrogation, that there's this control and this calm to it. What do you remember about getting that scene right?
Well, Paul was great. He just told me what I was doing. And when I say that, he was like, remember, you've never met her. She doesn't know who you are. You're asking her to leave with you. You have a very finite amount of time to get her to go and convince her. And so it was like, you know, I think I just thought of everything he said, and he kind of helped navigate what, the weight of the situation, but how can you make sure that she trusts you in a moment? And then of course they had their saying in the music, but it's also, you would imagine it would be terrifying if your dad had told you about this moment, if everyone tells you, if anyone comes and it finally happens for her. But Paul really just kind of we just talked about it a lot, and he kind of set up all the stakes. And then Chase, who's amazing. I mean, you watch her come out, and you're looking in her eyes, and her eyes have strength and innocence, and so talking to her, she's so amazing.
Are devices like that real? We know, did they get made up for this movie that would make it sound like that if they got near each other? Any of you know?
All made up, yeah.
Okay, it's probably better.
I think Paul at one point wanted to have a world with no phones, and then Chase came into the picture. She's like, "What?" She's like, "I'm gonna have a phone. Is this today?" and that became a great point in the movie. I mean, I remember in an early edit, it wasn't as much of a structure of tension, because that moment where you throw the phone out was much earlier, and then Paul built up to that, and the idea of her lying and having the phone, and her betraying her father, who thinks she's off the grid and living a life like his.
Yeah, because she's such an admirable character, but she's capable of mistakes just like Perfidia or anybody else in this movie. I mean, talking about Chase, and the way that the theme emerges at the end of this movie of watching the generational handoff and watching someone else take up the mantle, maybe get it right next time, maybe not, we'll see. And Leo, when you've done interviews, you talked about Paul as a generational filmmaker, like as someone who just kind of came at this moment, has really defined this whole generational thing. I mean, when you work with Chase, or you see this movie, or just seeing people coming up in the industry, like, do you share that sense of optimism that I think the end of this movie has? That like, hey, maybe the next generation can get it better than we did.
Yeah, I do, and I think that always took precedent in Paul's mind. He says he's been thinking about this movie for 20 years, and I can't believe how topical and absolutely pertinent it is to the world we're living in right now. It's so acutely about the extremism on both sides, and people not understanding one another and fighting for their just cause without looking at the other side. And Chase came in, and we knew that this film was going to live or die based on who that Willa character was. And you said it best, and you said it a bunch of times. She had the perfect combination of strength and innocence. The second you meet her, if you meet her in real life, you're like, I gotta protect this girl. We gotta take care of this girl at all costs. And she also had the ferocity and the fighting spirit that she took on from her mom. But at the end, that was in the script. Right from the onset, what was my character says? He goes, "Be careful, I won't," And the idea that she's doing something different than her mom, but what we tried to do and failed will hopefully be pushed to the next generation, and maybe they will get it right. And she represented all of that.
Yeah. Teyana, you were talking earlier about the monologue, the letter reading at the end, and how you're gratified that people have received it the way that you meant to. And I wonder for any of you guys, I guess open question, someone can jump in. Is there anything that you did that you hoped would come out the right way, that you hope the audience would see the way that you wanted them to, that has come back to you, that people have said they caught on to what you were trying to do in the movie? I can just make Benicio an answer.
Well, when I speak in Spanish and there's no subtitles, I've had some people that get it. Some people get what I'm saying in Spanish. Just, bringing a little bit of spirituality to Sensei. But, I asked Paul, are you going to put subtitles? He goes, everybody will get it. So,
I've seen that with the whistle when you're looking for directions, like specifically. Yeah, okay, yeah. That's a very specific thing that people are catching on to. I don't know where that specifically came from for you.
Where it really came from?
Yeah, or how you knew that was the right thing to do in that scene.
Well, I grew up in LA, and, Hispanic community, had a lot of Hispanic Mexican friends growing up. And to tell you the truth, during COVID, I worked with my gardeners a lot, planting cactus on my hillside. And that's how we talked to each other. That's what I did for a year. And then kind of that came out.
How are the cactus doing?
They're good, they're propagating.
Regina, how about you? Anything that comes to mind that came out the way that the audiences received the way you wanted them to?
I have to be honest, I don't know that I necessarily had an intention for the way the audience received it in that way. I mean, I just wanted her to, for you to feel Deandra and what she felt.
can I say something? I have a daughter, she's 14, and sometimes she's on the phone, and I've always wanted to grab that phone and throw it out the window.
See, that's what I did. Benicio's daughter won't have a phone.
Except they're all gonna sneak and have the phones anyway, is what we learned from chasing this movie.
I know.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys all for making this movie. Thank you all.
Thank you.